The howling wind carried Emma Montgomery's final prayer as she stumbled through knee-deep snow, her younger sister Olivia unconscious in her arms. "Please, God," she whispered through cracked lips, "don't let us die out here." The blizzard of 1876 showed no mercy to the two women stranded in the Dakota Territory wilderness, miles from hot springs and shelter. Xavier Cunningham pulled his coat tighter, squinting against the wall of white that had descended without warning. The cattle drive would have to wait. No sane man would push forward in this weather, but the strangled cry that reached him through the howling wind wasn't something he could ignore. He tugged his horse's reins, turning toward the sound that shouldn't exist in this empty expanse of winter. Emma's strength was fading. Each step became heavier than the last as she dragged Olivia through the deepening snow. They had been traveling to their uncle's ranch outside Hot Springs when their wagon had broken an axle. The storm had arrived soon after, transforming the landscape into a featureless white prison. Emma had tried carrying her sister, but the cold had sapped her strength until even standing became a monumental task. "Just a little further," she lied to her unconscious sister, knowing full well they were hopelessly lost. The bitter cold had penetrated her bones, and the temptation to simply lie down beside Olivia grew stronger with each passing moment. When Emma's legs finally gave out, she didn't fall so much as sink to her knees, still cradling her sister's body. The tears that slid down her cheeks froze almost instantly. She was 22 years old, Olivia barely 19, and they would die in this God-forsaken wilderness because she hadn't been strong enough to save them. Xavier saw them first as shadows against the snow, almost dismissing the shapes as drifts until he noticed the unnatural angles. Urging his horse forward, the 30-year-old cowboy found two women, one collapsed atop the other in a final protective embrace. "Hey!" he shouted, dismounting in a spray of snow. "Can you hear me?" Emma's eyes fluttered open at the sound of a man's voice, certain she was hallucinating. The bearded face that appeared through the curtain of snow couldn't be real. "Help her," Emma managed to rasp, gesturing weakly toward Olivia. "Please." Xavier assessed the situation quickly. Both women were dangerously cold, the younger one completely unconscious. He needed to get them to shelter immediately. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady despite the urgency flooding his veins. "My cabin's not far." With strength born from years of hard labor, Xavier lifted the unconscious young woman first, securing her across his horse's back. Then he returned for Emma, who was fighting to stay conscious. "Stay with me," he urged, lifting her with care. "What's your name?" "Emma Montgomery," she whispered as he placed her in front of him on the saddle, her sister draped behind them. "That's Olivia, my sister." "Xavier Cunningham," he replied, wrapping an arm securely around Emma's waist while holding the reins with his free hand. "Hold on tight. I'll get you both somewhere warm." The journey to Xavier's cabin was a blur of pain and cold for Emma. She drifted between consciousness and darkness, aware only of the solid presence behind her and the desperate hope that they would survive. Xavier's cabin appeared out of the whiteness like a mirage, a sturdy log structure with smoke curling from the chimney. He had left the fire burning low when he'd gone to check his trap lines, a decision that might now save these women's lives. He dismounted first, carrying Olivia inside and placing her on his bed before returning for Emma, who was barely clinging to the saddle. The wind had picked up, driving the snow horizontally across the clearing. "Almost there," he said, lifting her into his arms. Her body felt like ice, her breathing shallow. Inside the cabin, Xavier worked quickly. He stoked the fire to a roar, then turned his attention to his unexpected guests. Both women needed to get warm immediately. He removed their wet outer clothes with clinical efficiency, wrapping them in every blanket he owned. Emma regained full consciousness as Xavier pressed a cup of hot coffee mixed with whiskey to her lips. "Olivia," she asked, her voice barely audible. "Still breathing," he assured her, glancing at the younger woman on the bed. "But she needs warming up just like you do." Emma tried to sit up. "I need to help her." Xavier gently pushed her back. "You need to help yourself first. Can't take care of her if you're half dead." Emma reluctantly settled back into the blankets on the floor near the fire. "Our wagon broke down," she explained between sips of the warming drink. "We were trying to reach Hot Springs. Our uncle has a ranch outside town." Xavier nodded. "Thomas Montgomery." Emma's eyes widened. "You know him?" "Everyone knows Thomas Montgomery," Xavier said with a slight smile. "Good man, tough but fair." He moved to check on Olivia, whose color was improving slightly. "Once this storm passes, I'll get word to him. For now, you're staying put." Through the night, Xavier tended to both women, keeping the fire blazing and regularly checking Olivia's breathing and pulse. Emma drifted in and out of sleep, each time waking with a start to ask about her sister. By morning, Emma's strength had improved enough for her to sit up and eat the simple stew Xavier prepared. Olivia remained unconscious, but her breathing had deepened and her skin had lost the blue tinge of hypothermia. "She's young and strong," Xavier said, noticing Emma's worried gaze. "Give her time." Emma studied their rescuer as he moved around the cabin. Xavier Cunningham was tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by years of hard work. His dark hair reached his collar, and his beard was neatly trimmed despite his obvious isolation. His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, missed nothing. "Why are you out here alone?" Emma asked as he handed her another cup of coffee. Xavier's expression remained neutral. "Prefer it this way. Town's too noisy, too many people asking questions." "What questions are you avoiding?" She hadn't meant to be so direct, but something about this man intrigued her beyond the fact that he had saved their lives. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The usual ones. Where you from? Who's your family? Why ain't you married?" He shrugged. "Gets tiresome." Before Emma could respond, a sound from the bed drew their attention. Olivia was stirring, her eyelids fluttering. Emma rushed to her sister's side, Xavier close behind. "Olivia, can you hear me?" Olivia's eyes opened slowly, confusion evident in her gaze. "Emma, where are we?" "Safe," Emma said, squeezing her sister's hand. "This is Mr. Cunningham. He found us in the storm." Olivia's gaze shifted to Xavier, who nodded awkwardly. "Madam, you carried us?" Olivia asked weakly. "Had to," Xavier replied simply. "Storm was getting worse." Olivia attempted to sit up but immediately fell back against the pillow. "I feel terrible." "You near froze to death," Xavier said bluntly. "Take it slow." Over the next 2 days, the blizzard raged outside while inside the cabin. An uneasy routine developed. Olivia grew stronger but remained bedridden, suffering from a persistent fever that worried both Emma and Xavier. Emma insisted on helping with chores, unable to remain idle while Xavier provided for them. On the third morning, Emma woke to find Xavier preparing to venture outside. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a pristine landscape of untouched snow beneath a brilliant blue sky. "Where are you going?" she asked, wrapping a borrowed blanket around her shoulders. "Need to check my traps," he replied, securing his hat. "And if the trail to town is passable, I'll send word to your uncle." Emma glanced at Olivia, still sleeping fitfully on the bed. "I don't think she should be moved yet." Xavier nodded. "Agreed. I'll just let him know you're safe." He hesitated at the door. "Will you be all right here alone?" Something in his tone made Emma look up sharply. It wasn't concern for their welfare, but something more personal that colored his question. "We'll be fine," she assured him. "We're indebted to you already, Mr. Cunningham." He shook his head. "Xavier, and there's no debt." "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone," Emma said softly. "Not everyone would take in strangers and care for them like family." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of family, and he turned away. "I'll be back before dark." After Xavier left, Emma tended to Olivia, whose fever had finally broken overnight. Her sister sat up and managed to eat a small bowl of stew. "He lives here all alone?" Olivia asked, looking around the modest cabin with its sparse furnishings and meticulously organized supplies. "Seems to prefer it that way," Emma replied, washing dishes in a basin of water she'd warmed by the fire. "There's a story there," Olivia said with a knowing look. Despite being younger, she had always been more perceptive about people. "A man like that doesn't hide away without reason." Emma had been thinking the same thing, but she kept her thoughts to herself. "We shouldn't pry. He's done enough by saving our lives." Olivia smiled weakly. "He saved yours too, you know. You were nearly as bad off as me when we got here." Emma turned away, unwilling to admit how close they had come to death. "Rest now. We need you strong enough to travel when Uncle Thomas comes." While Olivia slept, Emma explored the cabin more thoroughly. Xavier kept few personal items, but she discovered a small wooden box containing a tarnished silver locket and a faded photograph of a young woman with a solemn expression. She closed the box quickly, feeling like an intruder. On a crude bookshelf, she found several well-worn books, Twain, Whitman, even a volume of Shakespeare's sonnets that appeared to have been read many times. Not what she would have expected from a solitary cowboy. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent Emma rushing to the window. Xavier had returned earlier than expected, leading a second horse loaded with supplies. She opened the door as he dismounted. "Your uncle wasn't at his ranch," he explained, carrying a crate of provisions inside. "According to his foreman, he's in Cheyenne on business and won't be back for at least 2 weeks." Emma's heart sank. 2 weeks? Xavier set down the crate and removed his gloves. "The foreman offered to come fetch you, but I—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I suggested it might be better for your sister to recover more before traveling." "And what did the foreman say to that?" He agreed, especially when I mentioned her fever. Xavier began unpacking the supplies. "I brought enough to see us through until she's stronger. The trail to town is clear enough now, so we can get more if needed." Emma noticed the "us" in his statement and felt a curious warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Thank you. We're imposing terribly on your hospitality." Xavier looked up, his blue eyes meeting hers directly. "You're not imposing. It's nice having company." The admission seemed to cost him something, and he quickly returned his attention to the supplies. Over the next week, Olivia's health improved steadily while an unexpected camaraderie developed between Emma and Xavier. They fell into a rhythm of shared tasks, from cooking meals to tending the livestock in his small barn. In the evenings, Xavier would read aloud from one of his books while Emma sewed beside the fire, repairing clothing damaged in their ordeal. One night, after Olivia had fallen asleep, Emma finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "Why do you live out here alone, Xavier?" He was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "I was a lawman once in Kansas, deputy sheriff in a town called Ellsworth." Emma remained silent, sensing there was more to the story. "There was a shooting. A cattle baron's son got drunk, started threatening folks in a saloon." Xavier stared into the fire as he spoke. "When I tried to take his gun, it went off. Bullet hit a young woman just married, expecting a child." "It was an accident," Emma said softly. Xavier's jaw tightened. didn't matter to her husband or to the cattle baron who had enough influence to make my life hell. He took a deep breath. I left before things got worse, drifted here, found this place, and decided the company of trees and mountains suited me better than people. How long ago was that? 5 years this spring. He glanced at her. First time I've told anyone that story. Emma felt the weight of his confidence. Thank you for trusting me. A half smile softened his features. Something about nearly dying together makes formalities seem foolish, doesn't it? The next day, Xavier took Emma to check his trap lines, leaving Olivia resting at the cabin. The brilliant sunshine on fresh snow made the world sparkle like diamonds, and Emma found herself laughing as she trudged behind Xavier through the drifts. "It's beautiful out here," she admitted, stopping to catch her breath on a ridge overlooking a valley of pine trees. "I can see why you stayed." Xavier nodded, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Most people only see the hardship, not the beauty." "I was raised to look for beauty in difficult places," Emma said, thinking of her mother who had taught her to find wildflowers even in the most barren landscapes. "My father was a circuit preacher before he died. We moved a lot, saw the worst and best of people." "And what brought you to Dakota Territory?" Xavier asked as they continued walking. "My mother died last year. Olivia and I were alone in St. Louis with few prospects." Emma's voice caught slightly. "Uncle Thomas wrote offering us a home and purpose at his ranch. He has no children of his own." Xavier checked a trap that had caught a rabbit, quickly and humanely dispatching it before resetting the mechanism. "Your uncle's a good man. His ranch is one of the most prosperous in the territory." "You speak as though you know him well," Emma observed. Xavier secured the rabbit to his belt. "I've done some work for him, breaking horses mostly. He doesn't ask questions about a man's past, just cares about how he handles himself in the present." "That sounds like Uncle Thomas," Emma agreed. "He wrote that we would be safe with him, that we could build new lives." "And is that what you want, a new life in Dakota Territory?" Xavier's question seemed casual, but Emma sensed an underlying current. She considered her answer carefully. "I want a life with purpose, somewhere I belong." She looked at him directly. "Don't we all?" Xavier held her gaze for a long moment before turning away. "Some of us stop looking after a while." The walk back to the cabin was quieter, both lost in their own thoughts. As they approached, Emma noticed smoke coming from the chimney and quickened her pace. "Olivia must be feeling better," she said with relief. Inside, they found Olivia up and dressed, stirring a pot of stew over the fire. "Should you be out of bed?" Emma asked, rushing to her sister's side. Olivia waved her off. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually, and I was tired of being useless." She smiled at Xavier. "I hope you don't mind me using your supplies." "Not at all," he replied, setting down his gear. "Smells good." Over dinner, Olivia seemed determined to draw Xavier out of his shell, asking questions about his life as a cowboy and his knowledge of the territory. To Emma's surprise, Xavier answered readily, even sharing a few amusing stories about cattle drives gone wrong. "And you never wanted to settle down?" Olivia asked innocently. "Have a family?" Emma shot her sister a warning look, but Xavier seemed untroubled by the question. "Thought about it once," he admitted. "Circumstances changed. Because of what happened in Ellsworth." Olivia asked, making both Emma and Xavier stare at her in shock. "The walls in this cabin are thin," she explained with a shrug. "And I wasn't always asleep when you thought I was." Xavier recovered first. "Yes, because of Ellsworth. Some things follow you, make it hard to start fresh." "Only if you let them," Olivia countered, her youthful directness cutting through pretense. "My father always said our past shapes us but doesn't define us unless we choose to let it." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Xavier said quietly. "He was," Emma agreed, watching Xavier carefully. and he would have been grateful to you for saving his daughters. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Emma couldn't help noticing the thoughtful expression that remained on Xavier's face throughout the evening. The next morning, Emma woke to find Xavier already gone, a note explaining he'd gone hunting and would return by nightfall. Olivia was much improved, moving around the cabin with increasing strength, though still tired easily. "He likes you," Olivia said abruptly as they prepared breakfast. Emma nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not," Olivia insisted. "The way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. There's something there, Emma. He saved our lives." "That creates a certain bond," Emma said dismissively, though she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest at her sister's observation. "It's more than that," Olivia persisted. "And I think you feel it too." Emma turned away, unwilling to admit even to herself how Xavier had begun to occupy her thoughts. "Even if that were true, we'll be leaving as soon as Uncle Thomas returns." "Unless we don't," Olivia said with a meaningful look. "Don't what? Leave?" Olivia sat at the table, warming her hands around a coffee cup. "At least, not all the way to Uncle Thomas's ranch." Emma stared at her sister. "What are you suggesting?" "Just that there might be a place for us closer to town, and closer to a certain cabin in the woods." Olivia's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Hot Springs is growing. They need teachers, shopkeepers, all sorts of people." "Olivia Montgomery, you are getting far ahead of yourself," Emma scolded, though the idea had taken root in her mind. "We know almost nothing about Mr. Cunningham." "We know he's kind, brave, and lives like a monk in the wilderness," Olivia countered. "And that he can't take his eyes off you." Emma refused to discuss it further, busying herself with chores to avoid her sister's knowing looks. But throughout the day, her thoughts kept returning to Xavier, his quiet strength, the sadness behind his eyes, and the rare moments when he smiled. When Xavier returned that evening with a deer slung across his horse, Emma felt an undeniable surge of happiness at the sight of him. He showed both women how to properly dress and preserve the venison, his hands sure and skilled as he worked. "My father taught me to hunt when I was 10, he explained as he sliced meat for smoking. "Said a man should know how to provide for himself and others." "Your father sounds like a practical man," Emma commented, watching his methodical movements. A rare smile touched Xavier's lips. "Practical to a fault. Kansas dirt farmer with dreams of something better." His expression sobered. "Never lived to see them realized, though." "I'm sorry," Emma said softly. Xavier shrugged. "It was a long time ago. Cholera took him and my mother both in '58. You were just a boy," Emma realized. 15, old enough to work, young enough to be stupid about it. He continued working as he spoke. Took jobs on cattle drives, learned to break horses, eventually pinned on a badge thinking it meant something. His bitter tone made Emma reach out impulsively, her hand resting on his forearm. "It did mean something. It still does." Xavier's hand stilled, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might say more, but instead he gently moved away, returning to his task. "Should have this meat ready to smoke by morning," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "It'll last you and your sister a while once you get to your uncle's ranch." The mention of leaving created a palpable tension in the room. Emma glanced at Olivia, who raised an eyebrow in silent communication. "About that," Emma began hesitantly, "we've been thinking. Olivia and I." Xavier looked up, his expression guarded. "Hot Springs is growing," Emma continued, gathering courage. "There might be opportunities there for us rather than being dependent on our uncle." "What kind of opportunities?" Xavier asked carefully. "I was a teacher in St. Louis," Emma explained. "And Olivia has training as a seamstress. A growing town needs both." Xavier considered this, wiping his hands on a cloth. Thomas Montgomery might not take kindly to his nieces setting up independently when he's offered them a home. We would explain it to him, Olivia chimed in. Emma's 22 and I'm 19. We're old enough to make our own decisions. Xavier's eyes returned to Emma's face, searching. And this decision, it's what you want. The real question hung unspoken between them. Are you staying because of me? We want to build our own lives, Emma said honestly. Somewhere we choose, not somewhere chosen for us. Something in Xavier's expression softened. Hot Springs is a decent town. Sheriff Jeffries keeps good order, and there are respectable boarding houses for single women. You know the town well, then? Emma asked. Xavier nodded. Well enough. Go in for supplies every few weeks. And would you? Emma hesitated, uncertain how to phrase her question without revealing too much. Would you continue to do so if we were there? The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. I expect I might find reason to visit more often, Xavier finally said, his voice low. Olivia's delighted laugh broke the tension. Well, that's settled then. As soon as Uncle Thomas returns, we'll tell him our plans. Emma shot her sister a look that urged restraint, but couldn't help the hope blooming in her chest. 2 days later, as Emma and Xavier were repairing a fence line near the cabin, the sound of approaching riders put them both on alert. Xavier instinctively moved in front of Emma, his hand dropping to the revolver at his hip. Stay behind me, he said quietly. 3 riders appeared through the trees, the lead horse carrying a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, his silver hair visible beneath his hat. Emma instantly recognized her uncle and stepped forward. Uncle Thomas Montgomery reined in his horse, his stern expression melting into relief at the sight of his niece. Emma, thank God you're safe. He dismounted quickly, embracing her before holding her at arm's length to examine her. When your stage never arrived and then word came of a broken-down wagon, we feared the worst. We would have died in that blizzard if not for Mr. Cunningham, Emma said, gesturing toward Xavier, who had removed his hat but maintained a cautious distance. Thomas turned, recognition dawning on his face. Cunningham. Xavier Cunningham, Xavier nodded stiffly. Mr. Montgomery. You know each other? Emma asked, surprised by the tension between the men. We've had dealings, her uncle said, his tone neutral. Didn't realize this was your property. Been here 3 years now, Xavier replied evenly. Emma looked between them, sensing an old disagreement. Uncle Thomas, Mr. Cunningham saved both our lives. He carried us through the blizzard and has cared for us these past weeks. Thomas's expression softened slightly. Then I owe you my gratitude, Cunningham. He extended his hand, which Xavier shook briefly. Where is Olivia? Inside, sir, Xavier answered. She's recovered well, but the journey was harder on her. As they walked toward the cabin, Emma fell into step beside her uncle. How did you find us? Your message reached the ranch and my foreman told me where to look. Thomas glanced at Xavier's back. Though I admit, I was surprised to learn where you'd been staying. Emma bristled at his tone. Mr. Cunningham has been a perfect gentleman. We would have frozen to death without him. Inside the cabin, Olivia's reunion with their uncle was emotional, though Emma noticed her sister's subtle glances between Xavier and Thomas, clearly sensing the same undercurrent of tension. We should leave immediately, Thomas announced after ensuring Olivia was well enough to travel. I have rooms reserved at the hotel in Hot Springs. We can rest there tonight before continuing to the ranch tomorrow. Emma exchanged a look with Olivia, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Actually, Uncle Thomas, Emma began carefully, Olivia and I have been discussing our situation and we've made a decision. Thomas frowned. What decision? We're grateful for your offer of a home, truly we are, Emma continued, but we would like to establish ourselves in Hot Springs instead. I could teach, and Olivia has her sewing skills. Her uncle's face darkened. Out of the question. 2 young women alone in a frontier town. I promised your mother I would look after you. We're not children, Olivia spoke up. And Hot Springs isn't exactly wild territory anymore. It's no place for unmarried women of good family, Thomas insisted. The ranch is where you belong. Emma felt Xavier's gaze on her but couldn't read his expression. We appreciate your concern, Uncle, but our minds are made up. Thomas Montgomery was clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. He drew himself up, his voice hardening. I see. And I suppose this sudden independence has nothing to do with your rescuer. He glanced pointedly at Xavier. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, Xavier spoke. Mr. Montgomery, your nieces made this decision on their own. His tone was respectful but firm. They're capable women who survived an ordeal that would have broken many men. Thomas studied Xavier for a long moment. You've changed, Cunningham. Last time we spoke, you were a drifter with no fixed address and a reputation that followed you from Kansas. People can change, Xavier said quietly. Can they? Thomas raised an eyebrow. The incident in Ellsworth was an accident, Emma interrupted, surprising herself with her vehemence. One that's haunted him for years. Thomas turned to her, startled. He told you about that? Yes, Emma met her uncle's gaze steadily. He's been honest about his past. A tense silence filled the cabin until Thomas finally sighed, some of the rigidity leaving his shoulders. Very well. I can see arguing will get us nowhere today. He looked between his nieces. We'll stay in Hot Springs tonight and discuss this matter further when we're all rested. The ride to Hot Springs was uncomfortable. Thomas insisted Emma ride with him, while Olivia traveled in a wagon with one of the ranch hands. Xavier followed behind on his own horse, having firmly rejected Thomas's suggestion that his presence wasn't necessary. I need supplies anyway, he had said, his expression making it clear he wouldn't be dissuaded. At the hotel in Hot Springs, Thomas secured rooms for Emma and Olivia, then disappeared with Xavier for what he described as a private conversation between men. Emma paced anxiously until they returned an hour later, both looking grim but composed. Your uncle has agreed to give you and your sister a month in Hot Springs, Xavier informed Emma when they had a moment alone in the hotel lobby. If you still wish to stay after that time, he won't oppose you. Relief flooded Emma. Thank you, I know you must have advocated for us. Xavier's expression remained serious. Emma, there's something you should understand. Your uncle's hesitation isn't just protective instinct, my reputation. It's not just Ellsworth. I've made enemies over the years, done things I'm not proud of. I don't care about your past, Emma said firmly. You should, Xavier insisted. A man's past has a way of following him, especially out here. Emma stepped closer, lowering her voice. Is that why you hide away in that cabin? Because you're afraid of your past finding you, a muscle twitched in Xavier's jaw. Not afraid, cautious. There's a difference. And is that caution worth living half a life? Emma challenged, her heart pounding. Never connecting with people, never allowing yourself to care. Xavier's blue eyes darkened. I care, Emma. More than is wise, perhaps. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. Before she could respond, Thomas returned, effectively ending their conversation. The month that followed was a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Thomas helped Emma and Olivia establish themselves in Hot Springs. Emma secured a position at the newly built schoolhouse, while Olivia found work with the town's only dressmaker, an elderly woman delighted to have an assistant. Thomas arranged for them to board with the widow Pearson, a respectable woman whose large house near the center of town had several empty rooms since her children had grown and moved away. Before returning to his ranch, he extracted a promise from both nieces to visit regularly and to send for him immediately if they encountered any difficulties. Xavier remained in town longer than anyone expected, taking a temporary job breaking horses for the livery stable. He called on Emma regularly, always properly chaperoned by either Mrs. Pearson or Olivia, though the longing glances they exchanged spoke volumes about feelings neither had fully expressed. One Sunday afternoon, 6 weeks after their arrival in Hot Springs, Xavier invited Emma for a buggy ride. Mrs. Pearson, sensing the seriousness of the occasion, allowed Olivia to serve as chaperone, with strict instructions to maintain propriety. They drove to a scenic overlook above the town, where the natural hot springs that gave the settlement its name sent plumes of steam into the crisp autumn air. Olivia tactfully wandered a short distance away, close enough to observe but far enough to give them privacy. "I've been thinking," Xavier began, his normally confident voice hesitant, "about what you said at the hotel, about living half a life." Emma's heart quickened. "And you were right." He turned to face her fully. "I've been hiding, convincing myself it was for the best. And now," Emma asked softly. Xavier took her gloved hand in his. "Now I find myself wanting things I'd given up on, a real home, a place in a community." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "A future with someone who sees the man I could be, not just the man I was." Emma squeezed his hand. "I see you, Xavier, all of you. I don't have much to offer," he continued. "The cabin, some land. It's a hard life, especially in winter." "Are you trying to talk me out of what you haven't even proposed yet?" Emma asked, a smile playing at her lips. Xavier laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "I suppose I am." He sobered, his expression serious again. "Emma Montgomery, I've loved you since I carried you through that blizzard. Maybe even from the moment you opened your eyes and asked me to help your sister first, thinking nothing of yourself." Emma's vision blurred with tears. "I think I began loving you when I woke to find you tending the fire, watching over us as though we were precious to you. You were. You are." Xavier took a deep breath. "I'm asking you to marry me. Not right away. I want to court you properly, give you time to be certain, but I need to know if there's a chance for us." "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "There's more than a chance, Xavier. There's a certainty." The kiss they shared was tender and full of promise, interrupted by Olivia's delighted squeal as she abandoned any pretense of not eavesdropping. "I knew it," she exclaimed, hurrying over to embrace them both. "Oh, Emma, just wait until we tell Uncle Thomas." Xavier's expression faltered slightly at the mention of Thomas Montgomery, but Emma squeezed his hand reassuringly. "He'll come around," she promised. "He respects a man who proves himself, and you've more than done that." The courtship that followed was proper but passionate, with Xavier dividing his time between his cabin and town. He began building an addition to the cabin, explaining to Emma that a proper home needed space for a family to grow. The implications made her blush but filled her with anticipation for their future together. Thomas Montgomery's opposition gradually softened as he observed Xavier's dedication to Emma and his evident determination to create a respectable life. The final barrier fell when Xavier tracked and captured a gang of horse thieves who had been plaguing the territory, including Thomas's ranch. He refused any reward, saying only that protecting the community was reason enough. They were married the following spring in Hot Springs' newly completed church, with Olivia as maid of honor and, to everyone's surprise, Thomas Montgomery giving the bride away with evident pride. "He's a good man," Thomas admitted to Emma before walking her down the aisle. "I was wrong to judge him solely on his past." "Thank you, Uncle," Emma said, kissing his cheek. "That means more than you know." The wedding celebration united the entire community, from the ranchers who had come to respect Xavier's skill with horses to Emma's young students, who presented their teacher with a quilt they had made under Olivia's guidance. Later that night, as Xavier carried Emma over the threshold of their cabin, now transformed into a proper home with curtains at the windows, and a bedroom addition ready for a growing family, she remembered their first meeting in the blinding snow. "You carried me once before," she reminded him, touching his cheek tenderly. "And I'll carry you whenever you need it," he promised, setting her gently on her feet. For the rest of our lives, their life together blossomed over the years that followed. Emma continued teaching until the birth of their first child, a son they named Thomas Xavier, after her uncle and his father. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Elizabeth Olivia, named for Xavier's mother and Emma's sister. Olivia married a young lawyer who had established a practice in Hot Springs, building a home close enough to visit Emma and Xavier regularly. She often joked that her near-death experience in the blizzard had been worth it since it had brought her sister such happiness. Thomas Montgomery became a doting great-uncle, visiting often and eventually deeding a portion of his ranch to Xavier and Emma, giving them additional grazing land and security for their future. Xavier never returned to his solitary ways. Instead, he embraced his role in the community, eventually serving as a deputy to Sheriff Jeffries when the aging lawman needed assistance. He found that his past experience, once a source of shame, provided valuable insight in maintaining peace in the growing town. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled outside their snug cabin, Xavier and Emma would sit by the fire with their children, telling them the story of how they met, though the more frightening details were softened, until they were old enough to understand. "Your mother was the bravest woman I'd ever seen," Xavier would say, his arm around Emma's shoulders, carrying her sister through a blizzard, thinking only of saving her. "And your father was my hero," Emma would add, her eyes warm with love as she looked at the man who had carried her to safety and into a life more wonderful than she could have imagined. "He still is, every day." 10 years after their marriage, as another winter descended on the Black Hills, Emma and Xavier stood on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the first snowfall of the season. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked suddenly. "Choosing this life with me instead of the security your uncle offered?" Emma leaned into his embrace, drawing his arms around her waist. "Not for a single moment. Even during that blizzard in '79 when we almost lost the livestock," he teased. "Even then," she confirmed. "Every storm we weather together only makes what we have more precious." Xavier kissed her temple, his breath warm against her skin. "I thank God every day for that blizzard that brought you to me." "As do I," Emma whispered, turning in his arms to face him. "It was the storm that led us home." As their lips met in a kiss that held the same tenderness and passion as their first, snow began to fall more heavily around them, not a threatening blizzard this time, but a gentle reminder of the path that had brought them together, and the love that would sustain them through all seasons to come.